Before we get into today's video, I do want to let you guys know that this video is for entertainment purposes only. Please remember to be kind to everybody everywhere in your everyday life, in your home, in the grocery store, and especially in the comment section down below. Please do not show hate to anybody, anywhere. Good morning, my lovelies, my beauties, my friends. My name is Christina and welcome to my channel. If you're new here, thank you so much for clicking on this video. I really hope that you will subscribe, stick around, take a chance on hearing some things that I have to say. And if you are a returning subscriber, y'all already know, y'all are my babies. So good morning, good morning, good morning. How is everybody doing today? I hope you all are having an amazing day. So today is a very highly requested story about the Turpin family. If you guys do not know who the Turpin family is, it is the story of a husband and wife that had 13 children and severely neglected and abused and tortured their children their whole entire lives. I mean, when this ended, their oldest 29 years old, still living at home, going through all of this. The oldest had an education of the 3rd grade, and that is it. So this is a wild one. So you guys, if you have not heard it, or if you're highly sensitive to stuff like this, there's going to be a lot of details in this video. Of course, as you guys can see, I am in my bedroom filming. For those of y'all that have been with me for a while, then you know around this time last year, it was pretty much the same too. All the kids are out of school. Everybody's home, hubby's home, and it's loud in this house. So I had to come hide in the bedroom and talk to you guys. So let's talk about the Turpin family and start at the beginning. David and Louise Turpin got married in 1985 when they eloped. The reason why they eloped is probably because he was 24 and she was 17. They actually started, I don't really know if the word is messing around, but talking. Let's just put it this way. David Turpin told Louise's sister when they were older that he had a crush on her when she was 10 years old. See, they went to the same church when they were growing up together. They both grew up in a very strong Pentecostal church. Louise's dad was a pastor, and Louise's mom sounded like a pretty sick woman from the stories that I've heard. Allegedly, Louise's mom would take her and her sisters over to her father's house, which was Louise's grandfather's house, and trade money for favors with the kids. So basically, she sold her children to her father while her husband was a pastor out preaching the gospel of the Lord Jesus Christ. Like, it was a whole hot mess. And Louise and her sisters, they went through it when they were kids as well. So Louise, when she was in high school, she was a loner. She got picked on a lot. She didn't have the best clothes. She got bullied all the time. And she just had a very hard upbringing. David, on the other hand, was different. Although he was a little weird to some people, he was super duper smart. I mean, he was like head of the chess team. He was on the honor roll. He took Spanish class. He was in like all these different clubs. So people thought he was weird, but like everybody knew him, and he had a very distinct look. He was very tall, very thin. He had his little haircut, and he was kind of popular. So you can only imagine how Louise felt when she was 10 years old being bullied at school, when she's got this popular 17-year-old almost grown behind man flirting with her. Moving on, like I said, they ran away when she was 17 and they eloped and they got married. It was a bunch of drama. I'm not going to tell you guys all the little details. Like, of course, her dad was mad. He wanted her to come back home and all of this stuff. But David, actually, because he was so smart, he got a full scholarship. He went to college and he got a really good job as a computer engineer, and he was making great money. I mean, he started out the gate making 6 figures a year. So Louise thought she had it made in the shade, honey. She had done left her home where she was being in these weird situations with her grandpa and her mom and being like a nobody at school and getting picked on and bullied and pushed around, to now she's with this older dude who's making all this great money and taking her on all these trips. And, you know, she basically ran away from home for this great life. In July of 1988, they had their first child, which was their daughter, Jennifer. Now, they go on to have 13 kids, and they named them all J names. I'm not going to say every single name, but they're all J names. So her first daughter, Jennifer, came along and they were so happy, super duper excited. Louise was calling her family and like paying for their plane tickets. She would pay for her mom's and her sister's plane tickets, and she would fly them to where she was, and then she would spoil them the whole time her family was there. They would take them to all the tourist spots. They would take them all the fancy dinners. I mean, her family was just looking at her like, wow, she really made it out. She's got this great life. One of her sisters actually said, and would joke all the time and say, well, Louise sure didn't marry for good looks, but she sure married for money. It was that type of thing. Eventually, they moved to Fort Worth, Texas. Texas? Y'all already know. Y'all are in trouble with me. Anyways, they moved to Fort Worth, Texas, and her family was constantly coming to visit. I mean, it was free trips for them. They was jumping on that plane, honey, like, here we go, right? They were constantly coming to visit them, and her sisters later said that they always thought David was kind of reserved, maybe a little odd, very observant, because every time they would come there, he would never really talk to the family. He would just kind of come in from work and sit in a corner and just like watch everybody and be really quiet. He wasn't like overly rude or anything in the beginning, but he was just quiet, and they thought, okay, he's just really smart, like computer tech guy that's maybe not super outgoing, and that's just how they felt. By 1993, David and Louise had 3 children at this point, and Louise developed a gambling problem. So she was going to the casinos all the time, spending money, losing money, and they started getting in debt. Like, she was spending a lot of money. Not to mention, like, they were living above their means. They had this big old gigantic house in Fort Worth, Texas, on a nice piece of property. They had nice cars. Louise would brag to her family that David got a brand new Mustang every single year. So like, they were going to all the fancy dinners. They, you know, flying the family on all these trips, and now gambling. So you can just imagine what their bank account was looking like. Now, their oldest daughter, Jennifer, she started going to school, and by the time she was in first grade, she was getting picked on so bad. In school, all the kids would say that she smelled, and it was so bad that like when Jennifer, she's a little first grader, you guys, would walk by, all the kids would hold their nose and go, ew, gross, you stink. And they would say she smelled really bad, and they said she wore the same exact clothes every single day, a pair of jean overalls and a white like florally top every single day. She did not bathe at all. She didn't wash her hair. She didn't brush her hair. She didn't brush her teeth. It was really bad, and she just did not have any friends. When Louise and David had their 4th child, Louise took the kids and went to visit her family this time. Now, this is when the family started thinking like something weird is going on, because they noticed that she was what they considered overly strict with her kids. Now, they said like the kids had to ask to go to the bathroom, or the kids had to ask to get something to eat. And when I thought about that, I thought, okay, well, maybe it's because they're at company's house, right? You know, like if you're at company's house and your kid says, hey, can I use the bathroom, or can I get something to drink? So they thought it was weird, but not too alarming to where they was like gonna call CPS or anything. But that was the first thought in hindsight looking back. Well, during that trip, Louise's sister Elizabeth asked if she could come back with her and spend the summer. She didn't have any kids. She didn't have no job tying her down. So Louise was like, yeah, come over and help me take care of these 4 kids. So her sister comes, and when she comes to live with them to move in for the summer, she ends up deciding to stay, okay? When she did, that's when she started seeing that there was a lot more going on with these kids and her sister and her husband than she had ever seen before. And the first thing she noticed was that her sister Louise nor David were ever affectionate with the kids. They never told them they loved them. They never hugged on them. They never told them they were proud of them. She also noticed that the kids always had to ask, not just when they were out of town, but if they could use the bathroom, or if they could get something to eat or get something to drink. She also said that her sister, when she would make dinner at nighttime and set the complete table, but then she would call the kids down one by one to eat. And she always started with her oldest daughter, Jennifer, and when Jennifer would come down, Jennifer had to stand there, give her eye contact, and then Jennifer had to smile at her mom. I don't even want to do it. It seems so awkward. Smile, and then her mom had to smile back, and the smile back was to let her know you could sit down. She would sit down and eat, and then in order for her to leave the table, she had to get up and do the same thing, the smile, and not even talk, and just leave, and like they would have to come down individually and do that and eat. Elizabeth said at this point she started noticing that David was not the quiet, shy type that they thought he was. He was actually quite violent and controlling. She said he was running his home like a cult and that he was abusive to her sister. She also said that one time when she was in the shower, he picked the lock and came in there with Louise, her sister, and they watched her shower and tried to laugh it off like it was just a big joke. Eventually, David and Louise ended up kicking Elizabeth out of the house because she started talking to some dude at work or whatever, and they just didn't like it, and it was like a whole drama. They quit answering her phone calls. She didn't know where they were at. She was sleeping on benches. Like, it was terrible. Louise and David continued to have kids, and by this time Jennifer was in the 2nd grade now. The same thing with her being in 2nd grade is like she was wearing the same exact clothes every single day. The kids said she stunk, and it was weird because she started showing what is now considered possibly showing signs of like abuse in a certain type of way, you know what I mean? They said that when she was in class, she would be in 2nd grade and she would be like touching herself and stuff like that. And it's like she didn't know what she was doing, and they would send her down to the office. And see, this is what I don't get. If she stunk this bad, okay, if she was wearing the same exact clothes every day, why wasn't CPS called from the school? Like, even if she didn't stink, she's wearing the same exact clothes every day and she's getting picked on, and then she's like touching it, like, why wasn't CPS involved then? I see now in this story, you guys are going to see so many people failed these children. It was not just the parents, although it was mainly the parents, but it wasn't just the parents in my personal opinion. Sometime in 98, Louise and David filed bankruptcy. At this point, they've got 6 children. They filed bankruptcy. They end up getting evicted from their big, beautiful home, and they take all of their stuff and they move to a different part of Texas into another home. Now, the neighbors came and checked out their home, and you guys, after they moved out, they sold that home because it was in foreclosure, and the people that bought it took them 3 months to clean it because there was feces and scratch marks in the walls and like urine soaked into the carpets, and it was just disgusting that these kids and these people, anybody, animals, anything, rats, I don't care, was living in a house like this. It was horrible. By 1999, they had 7 children at this point, and David was fully running his house like a cult. Those kids were terrified of him. They were terrified to go outside. These parents had these kids so brainwashed they could not even tell anybody their name. Like say they did go outside, if some little kid comes up to them, and that had happened before. Maybe they went outside for a little bit in their yard or whatever, and other kids in the neighborhood come up and want to play with them. Because you got to think about it, it's a bunch of kids over there. I know for me as a kid in the neighborhood, I would want to go over there. There's 13, well, there's 7 at this point, 7 kids over there. Like, this is where the party's at. Like, hey, can I come over? Y'all got popsicles? What y'all got? Y'all got Kool-Aid? What y'all got over here? You know, like, that's probably how other kids were. They came up to them and they'd be like, what's your name? And those kids would not tell their name. They would not tell their age. They were so scared of the outside world and regular, degular people. It was awful. One of the neighbors said she went up to one of the little girls that was outside and she was shocked. She was like, oh my gosh, she saw her hands, and her hands were snow white, like paper white.
And I said, whoa, I thought you had gloves on there for a minute. And she goes, you wash to the wrist or else you're wasting water.
And she said the way that the little girl said it was so creepy, like she had obviously heard that over and over and over again. You wash above the wrist, you're wasting water, like, Now at this point, with all the children, they pulled Jennifer out of school. Now Jennifer was the only one, the oldest one. She's the only one that ever went to actual school. And Louise was going to start private schooling them or homeschooling them. Now Louise set up a room in their house that had like desk and whiteboards and everything, but she never schooled them. As a matter of fact, a family member said that when she went in the little girl Jennifer's room, that she had all these dresses hanging up in the closet, and they had tags on them, $200, $300, $400 dresses, but they also had dust on them. So the little girl had clothes, but her mom was sending her to school in the same exact clothes. As a matter of fact, they would take these trips. So they would keep these kids in this house, right? Abuse them, neglect them, not really feed them, definitely not let them take baths or showers or anything. But then they would take these trips every now and then, and they would dress them all the same, and they would take these pictures and post them on their MySpace and their social media and send them to their friends to make them look like they had one big happy family. And some of y'all are gonna learn, I love y'all, some of y'all gonna learn about looking at people's pictures online and thinking that that's really their life. honey, we keep talking about this over here. We keep talking about this. Okay, we do. Anyway, so at this point, David, the dad, start finding new ways to discipline his children.
They began to be tied up, first with ropes and then using chains and padlocks.
He gets these chains and he puts them to their beds. They had bunk beds. He chains the kids to the beds when they're misbehaving. He eventually built like these cages too, to where he would put they were like dog kennels, where he would put the kids in the dog kennels. Neighbors at some points said that they saw the kids digging in the trash. I mean, you know, at one point, we probably, if you see neighborhood kids digging in the trash, you don't think anything. You just think, okay, maybe they threw something away that they shouldn't have. You know, maybe somebody dropped a ring or whatever. Somebody had money and threw it away in the trash, whatever. But like hindsight, when the neighbors were looking back, they were like, oh my gosh, they were digging it. They were probably looking for food. One of the neighbors said that in one of the houses that they lived in, they had a garage, and in the garage was all these brand new bikes, brand spanking new, never been rode, because the parents would not let them ride them. They had the bikes out there, but they didn't ride them. It was like it was almost all for show. Every bit of it was for show. But inside that house, there was chains, there was padlocks on the refrigerator and the cabinets so the kids couldn't go in there and get something to eat or drink. And it was just a house of horrors, a real true house of horrors. This went on for so long. There was even one point in time where they put the 10 of the kids, because they continue to have kids, and by this time they have 12 children. They put the 10 older kids in a trailer and they leave them there, okay? And then the mom and the dad and the 2 little babies, or the 2 youngest ones, they go 40 miles away and get an apartment, which is actually an hour drive. And the dad was coming and bringing food to them once a week, frozen foods, and making the 2 older kids take care of the 8 younger ones. And they couldn't go outside and play. They couldn't do anything. And if they misbehaved, the dad would tell the oldest kids that they had to put them in the cages or chain them to the beds. In 2008, it is said that Louise had a full out midlife crisis. Okay, she had turned 40, which 40 doesn't seem old enough to have a midlife crisis, but I guess so. I mean, I don't know. I'll be 40 in 4 years. Maybe mine's coming too. Ooh. Anyways, she had a full midlife crisis, and she was telling her sister on the phone, Elizabeth, that like they were swingers now, and that so they went from being in the Pentecostal church, right, to like running a cult at home, to now they're swingers, okay? And even to the point that she told her sister she met this dude online, and her husband, David, drove her to the hotel to meet him, okay? She goes up in the hotel, does the thing, the nasty, has him videotape it so she can bring the videotape down so her husband can watch it. Like, okay, well, you know, whatever floats your boat, but like stop abusing these children. How about that? Louise also got really big into like witchcraft and Ouija boards and like summoning the dead. Like she was wanting to summon the dead, and she started going to a church that was like a rattlesnake church. Like, I don't know, you guys, some of y'all are going to come for me down below and say, you shouldn't be laughing at the rattlesnake church. Listen, I never heard of the rattlesnake church, never even looked it up. You guys let me know down below. But allegedly she was at this church where they had rattlesnakes. They were dancing with the rattlesnakes and having church. I don't know, like I don't do snakes, and I definitely don't do rattlesnakes, so whew. Then finally at this point they moved to another neighborhood in South California, and this was the last place that they lived. It was a 2,400 square foot beautiful home in a really, really nice neighborhood. Like, oh my gosh, you can only imagine what the mortgage or the rent was on that thing, because California is so high and it's such a big, nice house. Like that had to be a $6,000-$7,000 a month home. Like, holy moly. Anyway, so they moved there, and again, on the outside to everybody, they had the perfect life. As a matter of fact, Louise's family said that she got the fairy tale out of everybody. She got the fairy tale life because she met her husband when she was really young, and he makes all this great money. He swept her off her feet. She doesn't have to work. She has all of these children, and she gets to take care of them. But people didn't really realize what was going on behind closed doors. I mean, these kids had no education. The oldest daughter, Jennifer, the one that had a 3rd grade education, she taught the other kids basically how to talk. I mean, all the other kids were teaching each other how to talk and helping each other learn how to walk and all of that, because the kids, their mom and dad didn't do anything with them. There was one point where Jennifer did try to run away, the oldest. She left the house. She ran. She jumped over fences. She ran through yards. She got somewhere. Somehow she ended up getting into like the town area where the town was. And she was going up to people and going, can I get a job? Can I have a car and an apartment? Like she was asking, like, I need a car, apartment, and a job. And she was going into businesses asking for jobs. But one, she didn't have an ID. She didn't want to tell her name, like nothing. So eventually when she realized that nobody was going to give her an apartment, a car, and a job, she called her mom. Her mom came back and picked her up. So she, like these kids, they had no idea about the real world or how to obtain things or any kind of life skills. When all of this finally ended was when their 17-year-old daughter ended up jumping out of the window and calling 911. Now, this didn't just happen overnight. This is when they were living in South California, and they had planned this for 2 years, is what the kids said. Planned this 911 phone call. And allegedly, 2 of the little girls actually jumped out of the window, but the 13-year-old got scared and climbed back in. The 17-year-old jumped out the window, and she had an old cell phone of her mother's. Now, the cell phone was disconnected, but on disconnected cell phones, you can still call 911. So she jumped out the window. Her sister went back in. She ran down the street, and she called 911. And this was the phone call.
Emergency?
No, yes, I'm still here.
What's your name?
Jadens Turpin. Okay, I live in a family of 15 people, and my parents are abusing. They abuse us, and my 2 little sisters right now are chained up. There's 13 kids, and then a mother and father.
And how many of your siblings are tied up?
2 of my sisters, 1 of my brothers.
How are they tied up? With rope or with what?
With chains. They're chained up to their bed. I've never been out. I don't go out much, so I don't know anything about the streets or anything.
Do you think anybody in the house will need to go to the hospital?
I'm not sure. Sometimes we live in Filth, and sometimes I wake up and I can't breathe because how dirty the house is.
When was the last time you had a bath?
I don't know, almost a year ago. But sometimes I feel so dirty. I wash my face and I wash my hair.
Does anybody at the house take any kind of medication?
Oh, I don't know what medication is.
Are you
but
homeschooled?
No, we don't do school. Our mother tells people we're homeschool. Our mother tells people we're private schools, and she has a fake private school set up. But we don't really do school. I haven't finished 1st grade, and I'm 17. I don't know much about my mother. She doesn't like us. She doesn't spend time with us ever.
Who takes care of you?
I take care of myself, and Mother does buy food for us, so she feeds us, but we never talk.
You guys, when I listened to that, I had my husband listen to it. It's just so hard to believe that she was 17. She sounded like a baby, man. She sounded like she was 10 or 11. So the cops come. They had to trace the phone because she couldn't give them an address. She didn't know where she was. And when the cops got there, she walked up to the cops. She pointed to the house, and they went in there. And it is said that when they went into the house and they saw the filth and they saw the kids chained up, there was 3 of the kids chained up or whatever, and they saw all this, the mom was looking at the cops and asking them basically what were they doing there. She was just so confused at why they would be there and why they would want to take her children. Well, they ended up arresting the 2, the parents, and they took the kids and they took them to hospitals. And everybody that worked at the hospital said the kids were so sweet and so well-mannered and just so kind. Like, the people at the hospital basically said that they were adopting the kids because they just loved them. Now, there was 13 children. The oldest was Jennifer that I was telling y'all about. She was 29 years old and had a 3rd grade education and had never been out the house like that and lived like that. Both of the parents were examined and were found competent to stand trial. Both ended up getting 25 years to life. They took plea deals. And the children had statements read at their hearing or whatever. And it was so crazy because the kids, all except for one kid, made statements basically defending their parents. It's like they did not know how abused they were. Because that's all they knew. You know what I mean? That's literally all they knew. You just think about some of these children in other countries, like these 3rd world countries and stuff, like, if Americans lived the way that they live, it would be considered abuse over here. But literally, that's all they know. Like, they walk around barefooted all the time. They eat what they can eat, you know. It's just a different culture over here.
Through the years, things became more and more overwhelming, but they kept trusting in God. I remember our mother sitting in her recliner and crying, saying she don't know what to do. She didn't want to use rope or chain, but she was afraid her children were taking in too much sugar and caffeine. The reason our parents didn't stop buying the soda was because Father needed it for work. He would fall asleep driving and got in an accident. They didn't know what else to do. I believe our parents feared if they asked for help, they would lose their children. Our parents didn't know we were malnourished. They thought we all got the gene from our mother because she was so small. Their first child went to a public school. They started noticing she wasn't really learning much, so mother started teaching her at home and saw a big difference. Our parents decided to start homeschooling all their children. It worked out good at first, but through the years it became very overwhelming. I believe our parents were afraid to put us in public school for many reasons. They felt that God put it on their hearts to homeschool. I feel like 25 years is too long. I believe with all my heart that our parents tried their best to raise all 13 of us, and they wanted to give us a good life. They believed everything they did was to protect us. If at all possible, I would really appreciate if the court would place our parents as close to the detention center they are in right now. So if we ever want to visit them, we can.
But to these kids that she had, they thought that it was normal. They thought it was all normal, and it was so sad. Now, the last that I've heard, the 2 little kids were in foster care. The other kids that were underage were in group homes going to school, and then the ones that were adults, because 7 of them were adults. 7 of the kids were adults living in that house in those conditions. Oh my gosh, it's the brainwashing, you guys, the brainwashing. The 7 adults are living in a house all together and are trying to get their life together. Now, everything that I've seen has said, oh, they had this happy ending. They had this great happy ending of a life. But did they? Did they really? Do they? I hope and pray they have the best life that they can have. But when you're raised like that, you know, you're always going to have different obstacles than people who are not raised like that. Now, I don't want to take anything from them because we all have struggles, okay? They got struggles, we're going to have struggles. But nevertheless, like, it has to be hard for them. They spent their whole life basically inside, you know? I know what it felt like for me just coming out of prison after 3 years. I mean, they lived a lifetime in prison. A couple final thoughts here. One being, if you see anybody where you think children are being abused, or even if it's a suspicion, man, report it. Please report it, because if they're not being abused, no harm, no foul, right? If CPS came to my house right now and said, hey, we want to check on your children, I'd open the door. Okay, cool. Check on it. Why? Because you want to help me out here? You bringing me some food or some babysitters? Because I'll show take. No, I'm just kidding. You know what I mean? Like, there should be no issue. If you feel like something is going on, reach out to a professional and report it, because it's not going to hurt them if they're okay. But if they're not okay, it could help them. The other thing was the 911 dispatcher. I don't know why, just the way that she was talking sounded like she didn't believe her. And I have to give the 911 dispatchers the benefit of the doubt. I'm sure they hear all kinds of like crazy stuff. Probably people calling that are like all on drugs. And like they probably hear the craziest stuff. However, it's still annoying when you hear it. Just like when y'all watched the chimpanzee video with Travis, and a lot of you guys were like, the 911 dispatcher was making you guys nuts because he thought it was a joke. He was like, oh, okay, your chimpanzee's killing your friend. Oh, okay. And everybody's like, just send the police, you know? But anyways, and then the mental illness, like, okay, how could they allow this? How? I really think the mother was severely mentally ill, but then at the same time, like, she posted these, I don't know, could she have been so sick in the head that she saw other people post pictures online and she thought that's what you're supposed to do? But how do you explain chaining them to the beds? I don't know. How do you explain living in that filth? I don't know. You guys, you let me know what y'all think. What do you think about this story? As always, my loves, please do not forget to like this video. It's a free way that you can help your girl out. And until next time, I love you guys so, so, so very much. And I'll see y'all in the next video. Bye. Love you guys. Bye.
In the dark, we are nothing more than dust.